Yes, it's an honor for me to be at the starting point of your series of lectures about German architecture. My English is not so perfect that I will speak freely here, therefore I have brought my lecture here in paper. And but if you are interested in some questions afterwards, we can do it in English, okay, and we will see if there is a discussion following my lecture or not. I have been asked to give you an overview of current trends in architecture in Germany. But how can I do that? Germany is the country with, I suppose, the highest density of architects in Europe. 135,000 architects are registered in the professional chamber. What all they build. And then there are other colleagues from the other EU countries whose works contribute to the diversity of our architectural landscape in Germany. So what could I have chosen for my lecture here? The buildings that most recently have occupied me personally as a critic. Then I should talk about the two Bauhaus museums in Weimar and Dessau. Not really an attractive topic for an ambassador of German architecture. The buildings that have bothered me the most in the recent years, that would be the very long story of the vanishing of the Palast der Republik and the return of the Berlin Palace. Another dull story. Or should I feature the residential buildings that have attracted the most attention and awards among architecture experts last year? The Wagner's Art project by Bogewisch's Büro in Munich. To be honest, I can't think about that so much. Much rather, I would talk about my current favorite projects, extremely economical residential projects of young cooperatives who are fulfilling their dream of a different kind of housing, with many tricks and a horrible degree of self-exploitation. There you can find interesting concepts, but aesthetically, they are too poor for a lecture, I think. Therefore, I have decided to give you an insight into one of the most important debates that has occupied the architectural community intensively over the last 30 years, since German unification. How are we to deal with the gigantic stock of social housing, with the large residential estates that have been built on the outskirts of almost every major German city and that suffer from a huge image problem? Questions of architecture meet questions of social development, a relationship that has been with us architects throughout the whole past century. Due to current events, I have chosen a quotation as a title for my lecture. Inhabiting pleasure and luxury for everyone. The quotation comes from the two French architects Anne Lacaton and Jean-Philippe Vassaille, the most well-known protagonists in the creative handling of large-scale structures of industrial mass housing in Europe. Only 4 weeks ago, the two French colleagues became honorary members of the German Architects Association, in a solemn ceremony in which the German architects clearly emphasize the importance of this building challenge in today's world. revitalization of housing blocks of the modernist age. I think this does not only concern conditions in Germany. Behind us lies quite a long period of architectural prosperity, in which much we talked about extravagant aesthetics. Technological experiments were discussed, as well as, from time to time, some ecological problems of our high-tech civilization. Lots of money was invested in striking signature buildings. In some cities, we saw strong trends towards reconstruction, in Dresden, Frankfurt am Main, or Potsdam. Entire old cities have been rebuilt. Whole region, especially in East Germany, lost a lot of population. A great number of cities began to shrink and required completely new strategies for planning. Above all, architects had to learn to find ideas for empty structures. However, unnoticed by all these public and professional debates, a social change has occurred over the last 20 years, which is now suddenly becoming visible in an unexpected, really surprising phenomenon. In Germany, we have a housing problem again. Particularly in some large cities, such as Munich, Cologne, Frankfurt, Leipzig, and of course Berlin, only apartments for the luxury segment had been built in the last years. Affordable living for the lower and middle classes can no longer be produced due to rapid land price speculation. The situation forces a new view on the old building stock, and not only on the popular old houses from the emperor's era, so-called Gründerzeit. I hope that you understand this German word, Gründerzeit, but also the less popular, if not even neglected, large housing estates of post-war modernism. To deal with this category of houses has become a very important task, to whom many architects in Germany are dedicated with a great deal of imagination and commitment. I would like to use the tailwind of the two French star architects to arouse your interest in those many colleagues who deal with the subject in the same way as the French do. After all, there are around 240 large housing estates with more than 1.5 million apartments in Germany, as apartments in housing estates. Large housing estates. In certain cities, such as Rostock at the Baltic Sea, up to 60% of the inhabitants live under such conditions. Over the past 15 to 20 years, the architects who often work in anonymously in this field have been able to offer important experience for contemporary architectural practice all over Europe. How should we deal with the large housing estates and their very special architecture? There are so many ways to get nearer to the problem. Is there a future to mass housing? Large housing estates, new cities from the conceptual and formal repertoire of modernism once were the promise of a bright future. Today, they are in most European countries no longer very popular. They are being denounced by opinion makers, planners, also in all important media. Living in a large housing estate is regarded as dull, as a bad fate for the socially deprived. And in former socialist countries, after the big political change, people hurried to join the Western point of view as quickly as possible. Big settlements bashing is in. But it's not that easy. Too many apartments have been built in this monotonous, anonymous, and soulless style. Even if you don't appreciate these typologies of housing, you can't do without them. It's a sheer mass that helps his form of housing to last. The most frequently asked question, therefore, is inevitable. What can large housing estates mean for the city today or later? For whom are they important? Today, in the future? How can they be made fit for the future, whatever it may look like? I think already the question is wrong, because it suggests that large housing estates are a particularly problematic type of urban fabric, a type of dwelling that is especially suited to a certain groups of residents. Whoever approaches the phenomenon this way is guaranteed to expect problems. I don't share that opinion. My position is large housing estates are growing to become quite normal quarters of a town. The only thing that matters is that they are not denied this normalization. Let's have a short excursion to the history of city development. Every age, every century builds its own kinds of cities. And every city is at the same time an illustration of its initial conditions. In the relationships between apartment, house, street, square, and surrounding countryside, the social ideas of their founders are embodied, or rather, spatialized. The industrial age has generated two new typologies of urban living. The multi-party townhouse, built for profit-making and populated by frequently changing tenants, and the company estate, originally run in a paternalistic manner. With the first model, the tenement barracks as a low-cost mass housing were to manage the social effects of industrial revolution, master the rural exodus and urbanization of gigantic proportions, in purely quantitative terms. With the other model, the standardized little family house, often featuring small gardens not far from the factory, was thought a qualitative solution of the housing problem by granting higher living standards, better sanitary equipment, and family friendliness. Both models, almost all over Europe, culminated in social housing, much sharpened by the enormous need for new homes after the World Wars. Living space for workers and other employees, that was the purpose of every large housing estate, no matter whether it was built on the outskirts of a large or small town. Even more clearly, this was the case for the real new towns, which were stomped onto greenfield sites as elements of state structural policy in industrial regions, always under time pressure, and therefore extremely rational. Whenever in the last 150 years cities expanded or even were newly built, it was a matter of living nearly connected to the workplace. It was a matter of living nearly connected to the workplace. But if cities are mirrors of their societies, what happens when societies change? No reason to worry about. At some point, all traditional towns became unfashionable, rather too narrow, too inconvenient. And of course, then they had to change, to adapt. Such functional changes were necessary periods in every city history. Such changes should be welcome because they hold the potential for greater complexity. And complexity is the quality that distinguishes urbanity. End of the excursion. With the construction of large housing estates, or even real new towns, you always will face a problem, the master plan. Behind this stands the idea of a completely man-made world, in some cases even a piece of art. I always are astonished that architects think they are doing artworks if they are doing their normal work. Sometimes it looks this way. In the late 20s, and so it looked then in the 70s. Such an idealistic conception may ease many technical problems, but it's completely useless for creating something that is indispensable for urban life, atmosphere. Planners, architects, and journalists prefer to say urbanity better than atmosphere. Whatever might hide behind this nebulous term, urbanity will never arise from a planner's drawing board. In Germany, a large exhibition is currently wandering through several cities. It informs about the first glorious, then catastrophic story of Europe's once largest organization for urban development, called Neue Heimat, New Homeland. Neue Heimat was a company for city development, for social housing. It was a social democratic project in West Germany. Its director is quoted with the slogan, "With us, everything comes from one hand. We even can provide entire cities." In a film in this exhibition, an interview, Tom Sieverts, one of the most important German urban theorists, adds a rather critical summary. He said, "A city from one hand is actually not a city. It's more than an asylum for the psychotherapy of its inhabitants, a machine for full supply." This is a current variation on Louis Mumford, whose famous sentence, "Houses make a settlement, citizens make a city," should teach us to regard a city less as a built image, rather as a vital community. The breathtaking and lively urban space in the contradiction of what planning is requiring and promising, namely, The breathtaking and lively urban space is a contradiction of what planning is requiring and promising, namely, comprehensive control. Sooner or later, every living space will diverge from the plans, from all the renderings and diagrams that came from the architect's screens or sketchbooks. Even the most highly tuned computer program will never portray all the colors and the richness of a real everyday life, which you know is unlimited in its diversity. As soon as our attention is turned away from the images, but towards the processes of real life, something comes into play that is too often ignored in the valuation of large housing estates, their own history. We only have pictures of the original, the born statues, but then we always forget that they haven't 20 years, 30 years, 40 years later, they have an own history. Which brings us to the real cultural challenge of our day. It is about the historical normalization of the planned worlds of modernity. How do the once artificial structures can get integrated into the fabric of a city with its many layers of the time? The reality check for every urban environment, including those designed on the drawing board, is the everyday life of its inhabitants. As this is going to change, it begins to change every cityscape in an exciting way, sooner or later. All you need is patience, so that variety and complexity can emerge. It cannot be repeated often enough. Time must pass. Modernism is no different than it was in all the epochs before. Please follow me for a short analogy. Even the Gründerzeit neighborhoods were originally planned cities on greenfield sites, artificial structures based on a master plan. They are not naturally grown up, as we are told every day, but they are master planned. This is our situation when one of the most urban quarters of Berlin was a building site. The plan you can read here from the landscape. And for many generations, they were in these Gründerzeit quarters. They were an expression of contempt, of a contempt for humanity and brutal greed for profit par excellence. It has taken almost 80 years, nearly a century, until from this urbanistic horror picture, the nostalgically idealized urban ambience of our days could be born. And then please compare the original conditions of the old tenement with the dwelling standard of today. Today one can love these old houses only because they are no longer the way they once were. What I wish to say, more courage for transformation. Let's upgrade. In the last 2 decades, in particular, East German large housing estates have seen countless conversions experiments, to which we owe one proof above all: concrete does not have to be a material for eternity. A short journey through attempt. It's the same house, before and after. You should assume that, it's a quotation. You should assume that also prefabricated buildings sometimes are old buildings, which may be treated accordingly. This encouragement comes from Frank Zimmermann, a Cottbus architect, who was the first to succeed in professionally dismantling a multi-story building and reassembling 6 townhouses from the components he thus obtained. It was a double high-rise. One of the both was deconstructed. It was put down, but not demolished, and not crashed. but put away and then decide in the next neighboring slot to build 6 townhouses from the element taken from the high-rise. It was a double high-rise, and now the situation is this. Open from formerly blind kitchens and bathrooms, open up formerly blind kitchens and bathrooms for daylight has become part of the repertoire of any ambitious modernization project. Maisonettes or penthouses with roof terraces shall extend your apartment. It only depends on an owner ready to pay for. Elevator, concierge, social service center for elderly living, there are no limits to imagine future-oriented dwelling. In matters of construction, such conversions have become routine. Continuing a building has become a quite common mission for architects in Germany. Some say this will be the #1 issue among architectural tasks in times to come. Well, if mass housing structures built in concrete can be redesigned just as freely as the colossal brick masses of the Gründerzeit, nothing should prevent us from changing our cultural values. If the once hated and bitterly fought tenement barracks could now become the most popular residential typology of today's middle-class lifestyle, it is unreasonably to imagine a renaissance of large housing estates someday. One of the perhaps most attractive but also most costly conversions of prefabricated buildings can be seen in Berlin-Marzahn, the Ahrensfelder Terrassen. The buildings before, there was 12-story panel houses, have been put down on 3 and 4 stories now and brought to a new face. Not only the face, but inside it was converted too. It was a whole quarter to be transformed this way, but it was so terrible and expensive that they never did it a second time. But they demonstrated it is possible. Concrete is no material for eternity. But perhaps the most spectacular case of rebuilding an entire new town is in Leinefelde, a small textile town in Thuringia, whose entire production was, its textile production was closed, and which therefore lost almost half of its inhabitants. So I have an overview on the small town. The old town is here. This was a textile mills here. It was being closed down in the 90s. And for the what does it say? Oh, how to get it back? Oh. Go, okay. And this was a new town erected for the workers of the textile mill in the 80s. And now it is here, you can see the empty spaces. It was totally declined by breaking down, but not only breaking down, reducing the number of houses, but changing the resting houses too. The brave mayor hired 3 architects, everyone with a very different concept. The order was no simple reduction of the housing stock, bring it into a new form as a whole, with significant improvements in the living standards of the remaining residents, for the remaining residents. And they succeeded. That was the first stage before these three architects came in. And then the total changement began. Reducing the panel houses and then making them new. Giving gardens to the tenant. This one architect, and this the other. Give the house new faces. Give honor to the entrance. Change not only the housings, the apartment houses, buildings, but the social infrastructure too. Reduce, reuse, recycle is another quotation by Mok Petzet, who was the commissioner for the German pavilion in Venice Biennale in 2012. I think it was one of the most important motto for a Biennale pavilion that we faced the last decade. He did it in 2012, in Leinefelde they did it 2004 already. They handled like a sausage. It was a landmark, a new landmark for the city of Leinefelde now. They call it the Leinefelde Wall. That is my favorite project in the town, making it from the ground floor of a living house, an apartment house, transforming it to a community center on the original walls, the original foundations. Yes, and it was a success. The normalization of the planned worlds of modernism, industrialized housing as well as functionalist urbanism, is the next cultural challenge that we face, from Le Havre to Vladivostok. Those who think they can get rid of the unpopular phenomenon by simply blasting it away, no doubt have ignored the factual, simply material dimensions of built modernity. Doing so means to ignore the global dimensions of the problem. The global dimension is the ecological one. Also, the material substance of modern age is a resource. Don't throw that away. We shall reuse it and then carry it into future.
Fast. Okay, so we have now plenty of time for a discussion, and you will have a lot of questions, I hope so. Perhaps one question or one remark from my side. how it is with ownership when we are speaking about these transformations. Is it a kind of private ownership, or is it a kind of cooperatives, or how it is in Germany?
Most of the experiments that I have shown here, they have been taken or thrown by public ownerships, because it's easier to get some help from public money, but not only money, but public thinking, or the governmental structures are. Even if a city has a problem with shrinking or with losing a population, it's easier to them to accept that we need other ways. So the private owner, he thinks about his money, and perhaps he thinks about his tenants, but he never will think so much about what is good for the city. And therefore, if you look for experiments that are good, which helps the city to survive, you have the city as a partner, or the city structures.
Okay, so it means that the flats have been not privatized after the change in 1989.
Yes, they have a big part of them. If you talk about most experiments I have shown have been done in East Germany, and there's after the change in East Germany, about I think 30–40% of the stock have been privatized, and there are differences between cities with more and or less private sectors. Those with bigger public sector it's easier for them to come to deal with experiments. So an experiment works. For instance, what I say von Leinefelde here is the biggest experiment we have seen in Germany. It was a completely common public job.
Okay, thank you. Please.
Thank you very much for the lecture. I would like to ask, what is the agreement with the inhabitants of the buildings? How do you actually make them to move out? Or one more question, which is connected: if the number of flats stays the same, or is it decreased? Like in some moments when you are making from this one tall building the smaller ones, if it's the same amount of flats, or how does it work?
The first step into this process that I described here is in the years of the big decline of East German cities. So the most important target was to reduce the pure number of apartments. But nowadays, meanwhile, we have in some or in a lot of cities we have a new need for housing. And now the experiment have changed, and now they are looking for more density, or for put some dwellings on the top of the roof or so. That's another kind of changing. But for my theory is that the city, this world of modernism is able to change. It's the same if you will reduce it or you will put on, so you rise the number. It's the same. For me, important. It is able to change. It is not these terrible structures of modernism. They are not for eternity, but you can do with them as you will do with the granite side. And so the people, most of them, well, if these experiments are answers of shrinking, then the people ask, they are a way. But most of them, the deeper you go inside the buildings, for instance, the Cottbus examples with inside with new ground plans, and so then the people have to move out, of course. But the best would be to come back. Was so in public ownership, you can arrange that they can come back.
How is it dealt with it when they need to move out? Actually, is the flats bought from them, or was it just rented for them, and do you need to find some other place for them, or
in Germany, it is if somebody, if you are in a flat and the owner or it's the same if it is a public or is a private owner, is going to renovate, he is obliged to give you an alternative forever or to come back. For myself, I have been living in the Gründerzeit house in Berlin, and it was renovated, and I went out and came back, and I had an alternative flat for about 11 months or so. And they had to pay the removal. But this is a question of law.
I wanted to ask about the public space, actually. I mean, in the modern housing estates, public space it was one of the most important values of the modernist idea. And as I saw these kind of conversions, you've been talking about this nice Japanese garden, etc. So I mean that most of the spaces there, they become private, like with small gardens, with let's say better kept parks. So, so the question is if there is any
I said it was
strategy.
It's tenant gardens. They are not private. It's a question of who lives in the ground floor apartment.
Yes.
Then
I mean, like open and closed. It's like the public space, everybody could enter, and then the private space, even if it's used by a tenant, it's private. You cannot enter.
It's okay. Yes,
So
private use.
The
Yeah.
question that the most
Individual.
exactly. So if there is any kind of common, like, is a general strategy how you deal with this,
If you are going to change these large estates, then you have the public space enough. That's not such a loss if you give some tenants a small garden in front of their house. It helps to bring order into the public sphere around the house, because people are looking for their greenery. It would be other if you're going to change houses in the inner city, but there is to change houses in the inner city. I have some examples, but I didn't want to bring it here to add it, because then it's no question of public space, but it's a question of density and of life quality in following the emerging density. It's a new question of discourse. How to where are the new limits for inner city density? If you are putting every roof just next one and next one and next one apartments or flats, roof flats.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I have a question to legislate that how it works in Germany. What about the authorship of these former buildings? Are you given it or?
Was it what?
the authorship of the original buildings, like
The authorship.
housing estates. Yeah.
I never heard of, in any singular case, that any of the architects or member of the architectural brigades who did the original projects of modernist panel housing that will be protest against the changing of their houses. Remember there was the row of that I was shed, the houses before and the houses afterward. I said all these are the projects of one architect who did it in Senftenberg, and he did it in Cottbus and so. And for me, it was he helped the original project to come to the real ghost or the real spirit of the design. Because then, when it was built, it was when the poor situation of no material and bad materials and no techniques and so. And now we have the techniques, now we have the materials, and now we have the possibilities to make it, as architects will dream, such a structure. And at the end, he will paint it white, and then we have a white swan. Before that wasn't. I think the architects of the former house would be happy that he has found their ideas.
Perhaps we can develop a little bit your question, how it is, for example, with the town planning question, because this is more important. Okay, when we are speaking about prefabricated housing, okay.
Because it is completely changed, completely transformed environment, completely transformed the idea. So,
master plan, exactly.
I have spoken to a lot of town planners. We were betroffen, oder wie sagt man? Betroffen? Wie ist sie betroffen? Die darf betroffen sein, das heißt affected.
Affected,
yeah.
Yes.
Two town planners who were affected by these doings. And of course, as planners, they are accepting situations that they're forcing doing this or that. They, on the other hand, they would protest against putting the houses down without another plan. But if you come with a new plan, then the planners of the first one will accept it because they believe in the plan, in the sacred of the plan. So I heard when they talked about.
So you don't really have examples of this kind of housing estates like protected?
Protected?
No,
there's, I don't know any, there are 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, perhaps a dozen, not more, single houses of this era that are protected, but no town planning area.
This is interesting because when we are speaking about this big housing boom in the 20s and 30s, and we already have these nice protected areas.
Yes, we have some. For instance, as I showed you, the circles from the 20s. Of course, the circle is protected.
Yeah,
but the circle in Tallinn never will be protected. What I show you, I know some of these areas. For instance, in Rostock or so, they are very, very artificial figures that I would protect too, but for whom? For people coming by plane and looking on them. But if you are inside them, you will never see it in its artificial value.
I mean, this is a simplification because if you have
but it's a reality.
If you have this kind of ornament, you have also the special or the spatial somehow values of the housing estate.
All the struggles that we have, that I have been following, were about. Be aware if you are changing, if you are restructuring these plannings figures, be aware that not to reduce the standards. Make no smaller children playgrounds. Look for what happens to the trees, what's looking to the, for the greeneries. There's no fear for the urban fabric or the urban figure. No, I don't know. I think the thinking of there's a lack of thinking in this dimension for everyone, except the planners. But the planners, well, they are following other laws. Other values.
Thank you for your lecture. I'm just thinking about transformation of the mass housing that we can see in Slovakia and Slovak, and normally what we see is just sort of like uplifting of the facade, like the insulation and everything. And some of the transformations that you showed us are interesting, but how do you decide between what is the successful one and like how do you decide when you see a transformation, but like when is it successful and when is it not? Because I can
think that sometimes it's really just like a matter of design, but it's not really improving the quality of life. So, in the successful transformation, what were the specific things that made the living in the structures better? If you could tell us some specific things.
Well, wait a minute. This is das kann man das ja yes, back to one here. Okay. Yes, here.
Okay, well, that's a bad one.
When the big change came, and when the problem arose, what are we for architects and planners who have not been grown up with this, and that we first have to think about that there's a new challenge for us with this gigantic mass of material of houses and stuff. Then the first step, the first answer was this, but this is no change. This is only optical. When I came here to Bratislava by train, and when I passed Czech, and then I went to the Slovak cities as well, as far as I can see them from train, there's a lot of these mass housings. They are all new colored, and I think, okay, and I hope they have done it with thermic insulation now, and so that's the first step that is doing more than only optically, doing new quality, bringing new qualities to the houses. But the total loss of need of such houses made East Germany, firstly in East Germany, now in all Germany, made the architects free to think to do more, not only insulation, but bring better qualities inside to the houses. Not only makes the houses so attractive that the bad look of these areas could be changed as it must be noble to live there. Why not? Make new entrances, make bigger balconies, or make window gardens. With Lacaton Versailles' big success is giving the houses window gardens. 3 meters, 4 meters steep. So, and if you see, have a look on this flat, and there's 4 meters new to the light. It's a gigantic win of new qualities, of life qualities. And I think the more life quality is to change, that the better is for giving these areas a future. And to avoid that they fall into yes, in this bad mood or bad spirit of only living for the poor.
But it's a real impact of this transformation. I remember Martin, this is really costly reconstruction.
Yes.
It's a kind of social impact. Does everyone know in Berlin Martin dreams of living there? I mean, did it change the society? It was just like everyone can watch now. There are 4 or 5 reconstructed houses, and it's quite clear that the role of Martin will be changed into such a reconstruction, reusing and recycling. Or to put it more probably, it's just a good chance for architects to prove what they can do, but knowing that at the end, for all these big social mass housing areas, there will be not a total transformation, because it is not a way to deal with it. So will the character of such a social mass house really change? Will you put some examples?
I think it's both. It succeed for both sides, by the owner, for the owners, but it's the public owner, and for the architects. The architects can show what is able to do with existing houses. They have several years ago. I was wandering with a lecture was addressed to architect students, and to say, stop building. We have anything enough. There is built everything that we need. We only need to change it to our needs. yes, I have said. Your first question: who's the owner of that? Because it is important that all these experiments have been financed with public money, and therefore one condition, the main condition, was every inhabitant after the change shall not pay more than before. But if the change will start in the private sector, I'm sure that then the flats will be more expensive, of course. And then, let's say, if this is an instrument for gentrification, perhaps. Gentrification in big housing estates, perhaps. We have known of that, but perhaps it can go this way. Let's see, I'm not sure if it is avoidable.
I have a question. I would like you to opinion. What will happen next? Is it the end of the transition of what can we continue?
Next of what?
How this is the end of the transformation, or can it continue in something else, or I don't know how to say. What is the next chapter? What will happen next?
I do not know what are the living conditions in the next 50 years. What I can say is all these the basic structures of these buildings, they are built for 100 or 120 years. And they are, until now, they are 20, 30, not more than 40 years. They are 60 years that I am standing steady in the landscape. And what is changing with our living conditions, and we know that we can change nearly everything. We can change the ground plan, we can change the inside walls, we can change the facades, we can change the heights, the facades, everything. Let's do it. For instance, the next big program in Germany for German architects is making these structures easy for elderly people. That means that there's special no steps inside, and we need a lift for 3 stories. You need a lift, and so what's a totally new program. There are some of these buildings that have been changed 10 years ago, now facing the next change because making them fit for elderly.
We've been speaking about layouts and how to change them. My question would be, sometimes to introduce a little bit, when we compare sometimes the old layouts of these prefabricated housing with the contemporary, commercial housing, then it will go much better for these old flats. So how it is in Germany? Could you make some similar observation that these old flats have been actually more, better organized than the new development?
That I'm not sure, because of course architects were now doing new housing. They will find for new living concepts, and they make new layouts. But these, let's say in Germany, I do not know how it is in the neighboring countries, but in East Germany was all these layouts, they are quite well for the family. And the number of family members that was there, the statistically average, for the average. Okay, it was the same question with the Gründerzeit. We know that, we say, okay, these Gründerzeit flats, they are fantastic. They have 3 rooms, and they are living today 2 persons, maximum 3. In the original, they have even 6, 7, 8 people have living in this same kind. That it means if you have a special room number, and then you can say how many people are in which situation are able to live in. And for us, if these houses have been made for family, for parents and 2 children, and now they are living to two persons. It is totally okay. Why not?
I have one question more. Your presentation was titled "Luxury for Everyone."
My title quotation, yeah.
What does it mean, the luxury for a East German and the West German?
It was, oh no, yes, that's a problem of quotation. When I've been a guest for the ceremony when Lacaton Vassal got their honorary membership, and we were always very very solemn situation, and it was of course this meant as a requirement. Architects, if you are doing housing, think about it. You're doing not only for the poor, but it's luxury, even for the poor. So it was my understanding of the quotation, and I took it because I think perhaps it's easier to talk with you about East German experience if I take a quotation from France.
Only when we are speaking about demolition of part of the housing estates, that this is not the case for the West Germany.
I mentioned the large exhibition that is wandering through several states. It started in Munich, now it is in Hamburg, and I think it will go to other places in Germany. Perhaps it should go to other countries neighboring also, because for me, as an East German, it was very, very interesting to see that the West German, in the same times when in East Germany the panel flat was arising everywhere, in West Germany they did too. Not only in panel technology, but with the same master plan thinking on doing whole cities beneath the old city. These big estates, the ideology of making big estates. I showed you one here, it was München-Perlach. I said München-Perlach here. It didn't. Oh no, I didn't. Oh, hier noch jetzt hier eins weiter. 80,000 inhabitants. It has been built. It's not the plan, it's not the model, it has been built. And the questions arising from these estates are the same as in East Berlin, in East Marzahn, or in Rostock or so. That means, for me, it was very interesting that the same problem they had, not the problem of declining as it was by the loss of population, but it was their problem was a loss of Ansehen. Ansehen.
How the people reflected about the housing.
Naja, also positive.
Negative and positive reflection.
Reputation. The loss of reputation for this kind of city building. This loss was totally. At the end, if you are in Munich and you say you are living here in Perlach, and that is okay, better you don't come again. And to avoid this development, I think the same works as in the East to change the spirit for that people can live there without fearing that they are ignored by the rest. They shall not be, and they never become slums. As well as some of them are called so until now. And so, in this way, what I have been talking about is a social program too. It's not only for looking for for housing, for pure numbers, but it's a social program too.
In the beginning, you showed a picture of a Gründerzeit quarter in the beginning, like 150 or 120 years ago, and you described it as a horror, and you made a comparison to the new mass housing of the 60s maybe. And my question is, today, the Gründerzeit area,
or this? Or this
are so attractive as well because there's so much cultural offerings, there's like a quality of living, there's gastronomy and boutiques. Do you think this is necessary for the big mass housing areas as well, that this happens, and will it happen one day?
It has.
It becomes a diverse neighborhood.
If I would have expected your questions, I could just shown some pictures. I have a collection taken in the very special 90s, when all these cities came into a very structural crisis. So the people living there came into the personal crisis, and then it was the time of the years of privatization, anything of life, and so a lot of new jobs, new startups, what we would say today, went. They didn't have in the 19th. Nobody knew about sharing spaces. But everybody who, if I have to do a startup, I do it in my own flat, going to my bedroom and so the first architects in East Germany who was being in a private bureau, they did it in their own apartment. And by this way, in the 90s, a lot of these East German structures had been mixed off by some, for some economically, not for housing, but for economic enterprises, and also for trade, for small trades, for bureau materials, or for copy shops, or notarius. So such kinds, who is able to do his job in a private apartment. And this happened. It has now came to an end because there have been the law that everybody who's these flats should only be used for housing, nothing else. But in these different years, in these difficult years, it was a very big number of attempts to do so. And I would, even the trade changes has been, you can still find them today. And the more you go eastward, also to Ukraine or to Russia, or so, then there the cities really have changed. The picture of the cities has changed totally, because there these difficult years took a little bit longer than here in Central Europe or so.
Are there any kinds of architectural dreams that go into the future dealing with mass housing? I mean, you come from Berlin, I live in Berlin. It's quite clear there's a lack, an immense lack of flats, apartment houses. So probably it's quite autofactual that not everyone will live in a Gründerzeit house, but even one of these old tenants in the Gründerzeit area.
I'm not sure if this. I'm not sure.
Dreams of, apart from changing these mass social housing areas, constructing something new, another way of dealing with big amounts of people?
I'm not sure if this big love for Gründerzeit quarters is not really as a German or as a Central European trauma, or as a special problem of us that we have been grown up with this, because they love them, but everybody should know we cannot reproduce them. We have them or we have them not. And if they all are sold, and if they all are filled up, and then it's end. But the population will further grow. And if I'm not sure if it is really, it's not the global problem is others. If you go to Kiev, or not to go to Shanghai or go to Moscow, but what are they doing? Mass housing, 36 stories until the horizon. 10,000 and 10,000 as mass housing. And nobody there is thinking about Gründerzeit. Gründerzeit is a luxury problem of some privileged Central European inhabitants, nothing more.
Yeah, that's clear. But what about the future? for the future.
The future is what is needed. What forces the architects and the planners in Kiev or in Shanghai is the need for housing.
Yes, but with a different approach, or still the same? We repeat and repeat and repeat. It will be the same problem. It will be slump one day. Or is there any new approach?
I'm not sure if the mass housing in Hong Kong or in Shanghai, what I've seen is there are not slums. That's a normal way of city living, or Singapore or so. I think that we are not in the flyover states in the state, in USA or in Siberia, where you have space enough to everybody can make his own villa in the wood. We are not there. If we say that the future of mankind is in the cities, and we must think about living dense, perhaps living high up. That's no alternative. I think all this special German, or I'm not sure, the Central European mood of every family has its own house. It's a luxury that our planet will not bear in the future.
Actually, when we talk now about this problem of densification and about this lost dream of Gründerzeit, and then in contradiction we have this mass housing, housing estates, it is a little bit like controversial what you have done in Germany, that from these big slabs with hundreds of flats, you have actually done a kind of Gründerzeit 5-story high blocks. And I mean, the future is exactly in this big concentration of inhabitants, and whether you have it in a dense built structure or you have it in a high rise, both ways are like.
To answer this in a global view, Germany is not the best example, because Germany has undergone several steps that are not typically for other countries as well. For instance, my example that I've shown here, especially in Leinefelde, is the most experimental towns where this was the biggest crisis. But there are a lot of towns in Europe, they have no crisis. They are only growing. And then they are densifying, of course. We have faced the situation that for 10 or 15 years we have been decline of population, and therefore the city had to react anything, because then we had, if they would not have broken down so much houses in Germany, they have vanished about 3 million apartments destructed by public money, after they have been built with public money. And now the fires, because it is a following a mega trend, that means the end of the age of industrialization. Therefore, my ex-course living in the industrial age, this industrial age has come to an end, and everything is going on for a new situation, even also for new plan of how people will settle in their countries. Nobody knows in which direction it goes, but we have to accept to adapt to this new situation. That is a way of surprise, perhaps, an adventure, big adventure. And some countries, they have a smoother way and they can do it as they have done it always, but Germany was very interrupted in all these developments, and now we have had the heavy downsizing, and now we are going to do upsizing again. But in other places, the cities which are growing now are not the same what are declining before. There are some cities where it's a big loser, and will never be look for density or look for high rises. They stay now in the new situation. Others, well, as Munich and Cologne and Hamburg and Berlin, they never did really get smaller, but they are now growing rapidly. And so that they have to look for other experiments, and for the experiment not only in the Gründerzeit, because that is the middle class's favorite areas. No, we need the biggest experiments we need in the mass housing areas.
a sort of pragmatic question. What about the material? Is it reusable? Like people are not worried that about the quality of the material, the best for the construction, because in Slovakia, the biggest suburb, Meta, Petržalka, they were really afraid of the general public that it's not good quality, that in a few years it will be destroyed by itself. The structure is not very good. So were there some tests done before the material, the panels were used? People are worried about this?
If you go inside the buildings and if you change the inner corpus, then of course you will destroy material. It was put away, but not so much as if you will destroy the whole building. The structure itself, the most quantity of material is solved. But if what is coming in now are new materials, it is the next question for architects too, to say we must be aware of building with materials that are removable, because we have removed it once and perhaps we will remove it the next time, the third time or fourth time. So be aware of removable materials as the next discussion about ecological building. For architects, a very important question in Germany.
In the existing buildings, there are no problems with durability because all the structure,
Concrete? Well, what should it be? Dangerous for nothing.
Steel connections, for example, they are quite problematic, like
I'm not sure. When I witnessed the first examples of changing the inner structures of a building, and you think, concrete slab, concrete is very, very hard. No, it's a question of machines. What you need is technique to do that. When I first time said with this Frank Zimmermann from Cottbus, who did this high-rise 206 townhouses, he said, well, we open the door. The problem is you must know where the static is, that you cannot hurt the statics. But between the iron grid, you can do what you want.
I mean, the degradation, because like the bridge in Genoa collapsed. I know it's a completely different example, but I was just thinking there were.
Yes, but it was another statically system, because it was on tension and all these things. This is a quite simple system for slab buildings. They are like mud.
It's just because you mentioned something about 120 years that they can last.
When I was working as an architect, our engineers told me so. They said we are really making our.
We keep hearing something completely different. Like we still think that these, for example, Petržalka, the big mass housing, was only designed for like 20 or 30 years.
Yeah, to me, for the windows or the technical equipment or so, but the ground structure, the wearing structure, it will be, I think, 200, 300 years.
This was only a part of this ideological change after 1989. But, I remember our colleagues were talking about the necessity to completely remove Petržalka, because this is something which will happen in a few decades. And what is happening is just the opposite.
I think everything what doesn't function in these houses has been repaired in the last years behind us. What we are now faced are this kind of structure, what has been ready for the next 50 years. So.
Because you were kind of imagining the horror of the future, that they all will just collapse in 1 year. What will happen next?
All these houses are so?
Yes.
No. Go to an earthquake area and look which building will survive. It was these concrete structures, not the brick ones.
But then I'm really quite surprised that you do not have any example of monument protection of this kind of estates, because this is quite a topic in Europe nowadays. Yes. I hope the successes of the Dutch and of the French architects, we have Lakatos, will bring us to this
that we can accept even urban structures as monument. Now, what we are doing the first in Germany, I don't know what otherwise, but I think these are some structures of the 20s and 30s, so it is World Heritage now. But younger, I don't know. No, nowhere. Don't know. Sorry. Not even these famous terrace houses in Switzerland by Atelier 5. Not even them are protected, I think.
Any other questions? Not. Oh yes, still.
Isn't the low density of this mass housing master plans a bigger problem than the buildings itself? Like the master plans of these sites are like really low density. They are far away from each other.
It's different in every case. Every case is otherwise, I think. And I think in every country it's otherwise, and in every decade it was otherwise. When I was studying, we said the highest density you will ever get was 300 persons on hectare. Then I came to Berlin, and I lived in Prenzlauer Berg, and we have 600 persons per hectare. And now both is human, I'm told. What is really human? Okay. And when I come to Hong Kong, as I say, 1,200 is human. I'm sure that they are, the younger these estates are, the denser they are. Even in socialist countries in the 80s, they were more compressed than in the 60s or in the 50s. And therefore, I think it is possible to bring some density into the very green and so often open spaces. But also part of our discussion in Germany, but then do it with a plan, because these areas are planned. And if you dense them, you need a plan again. But the same was on the other hand, what you had to learn, because if we are putting down, for instance, Leinefelde, we have really big areas now empty again. To bringing down houses, you need a plan again. If you do it without plan, that happened in Hoyerswerda, for instance, one of the fastest shrinking cities in Germany all over. They had to destroy houses without plan, and what did they do? They destroyed the first high-rises in the city center. And so they killed the city crown, what you say, because it was the proudness, the objects of pride of the people. They took the first, okay, put away. It's a very, very hard mistake, and it shows that even if you decline or to erase a city, you need a plan. Although I say be aware of the master plan, but if they planned city, then you must act after a plan.